Hey there, this is Rob G., Rob Galuzzo, the writer-director of the Schyko Legacy documentary, and I'm very, very happy to be sitting with the writer of Schyko 2, Tom Holland.
Hello, everybody. It's Tom here.
Oh my God, can you believe this? It's been 30 years, over 30 since this movie came out, and I think it's long overdue.
I think that it's just amazing.
Yeah, I mean, did you think you'd still be talking about Schyko 2 30 plus years after it came out?
No, I didn't, and right away I want to give a big cheer to Richard Franklin, who directed it and hired me to write it, and really gave my career a real start. Schyko 2, I think, was the biggest movie in the summer of 1982.
83 or 82?
83, excuse
83,
me,
yeah.
83, yes. And Richard wanted to start with the classic, montage of Marion Crane being killed in the bathroom.
Right, so this was always intended to be the starting point for Schyko 2.
Always in Richard's head, yes.
Yeah, and I mean, it's important because this is the key scene, because, you know, the quote-unquote villain of this movie is actually not Norman Bates, but it's Vera Miles' character, Lyla. So
In Schyko 2, you
yes,
mean?
yeah. So this is kind of the moment that sets Lyla on her quest in Schyko 2.
It's also the most famous montage sequence, or one of the few in film, probably this and Eisenstein.
Oh, yeah.
And this was always the big argument that the knife never penetrated the body.
Mm-hmm. And do you remember seeing the experience of seeing Schyko for the first time?
Scariest movie I ever saw. Absolutely.
Were you how old were you? Were you a teenager when you saw this?
Oh, I was 12, 13.
Mm-hmm.
I know, and I know I watched it from between closed fingers, behind my seat, under my seat. I'd never seen anything like this was the dawn of the modern horror movie, and specifically because of this montage sequence.
Right. And at this point, were you a big Hitchcock fan? Were you familiar with his films?
I was just a kid out of Austining, New York, and Highland, New York, and no, I didn't have a clue, but I knew that something had changed, because this is a nod to Fright Night, but the horror movies then were like AIP and Hammer,
Mm-hmm.
which are sort of the color, widescreen masters. They didn't cut a lot,
Mm-hmm.
This is fascinating right now. It just said Oak Industries.
Yeah.
This was originally started as a cable movie.
Mm-hmm.
Universal thought we're just going to do this. This was the beginning of cable too, by the way, and they just thought that they were going to put this on cable.
Right.
And then what happened was the Tony Perkins, God bless him, his name is on the screen right now, agreed to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And Universal released the news, and the worldwide reaction was so overwhelming. They were dragged kicking and screaming into releasing this as what they considered a low-budget throwaway movie. But what happened is during production, the amount of interest around the world, and the news people who wanted to interview Jerry,
Yeah.
just grew and grew and grew till there was just so much interest in a sequel to Schyko that the studio had never realized. Also, you're using the same people, Al Whitlock, who did the plates,
the matte paintings, right?
the matte paintings. He did it in the original.
Mm-hmm.
You had Dean Cundy, who was John Carpenter's cinematographer.
Oh, yeah.
I think he just finished The Thing or something like that.
Yeah.
I can't remember what Bernard had.
There he is.
I had done
Tom
nothing.
Holland.
I'd done nothing except The Beast Within.
Right, you wrote that one.
Hilton A. Green was the first AD on the original Schyko,
Mm-hmm.
and he worked closely with, as they said, Mr. Hitchcock during his entire time at Universal.
Right.
And Richard Franklin was a Hitchcock scholar out of USC,
Mm-hmm.
and had interviewed Hitchcock at Universal.
Yeah, he did a retrospective on Hitchcock at USC, I think in 1967.
There you
One of
go.
the first had him come down, and then Hitchcock invited him to the set of Topaz and
yep.
later Family Plot as well.
Yep.
So they kind of definitely had a rapport.
And somewhere there's a picture of a very young Richard Franklin with Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's talk a little bit about kind of getting this gig, because as you'd said, you had done Beast Within, you'd written that already. And Richard, I think Richard had done Road Games at this point, and he'd also done Patrick, which has a lot of Psycho influence in it.
He'd done both of those, and yes, he was like the definitive Hitchcock scholar.
Right. So, if I remember correctly, you had written a script. It was kind of like a sword and sorcery script, something fantasy wise that Richard came across.
Called The Crystal Tower.
Crystal Tower. So he saw your script, and based on that, he contacted you.
We shared the same lawyer.
Okay.
And the lawyer gave him my material. He read Crystal Tower, and we met and we got along. And miracle of miracles, he hired me. And this turned into such an enormous surprise hit, Psycho 2, that it launched my career in Hollywood, really. The Beast Within before that, which is now fondly remembered, but that was not a success at the time. And this was an enormous success.
Yeah. And then right now we have Robert Loggia, who's a great character actor.
Great.
Very recognizable. I actually read a little bit of trivia that Richard did in fact meet with Simon Oakland, the psychiatrist at the end of the first Psycho. But unfortunately, about playing this psychiatrist character again, but apparently he was very...
That's a matte painting driving up to the hotel.
Yeah, it's not real.
Then that was on the back lot of Universal.
Right.
And it wasn't there. Everybody assumes it was there forever. We had it built. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, with the success of the movie, they kept moving it around, and it became a big attraction on the Universal tour.
Right, because this isn't the house was moved from where Hitchcock had initially put it.
Well, it wasn't in the same place, but the house had been torn down back in 1962. Mm-hmm. So there was no existing Hitchcock house on the Psycho house on the lot. Right. But ever since this, and now through the tour, it's been there now for 30 years or whatever.
Yeah.
This was just at the beginning of the Universal tour, too.
Right. In fact, didn't tours go through while you were shooting at this point?
Yes, and it was the first time it started to happen, and it irritated the hell out of everybody.
I can imagine. So talk a little bit about Tony. I mean, I felt like it was important to get him back for this role. Would you guys have considered doing it if he said no? Because there's been a big rumor that if he had not agreed to do it, you guys would have gotten Christopher Walken, which would have been really bizarre but interesting in its own right. But I can't imagine it without Tony Perkins. So. Well,
I can't imagine it either. But we started out without Tony, and if Tony hadn't done it, we probably would have stayed a cable movie. I mean, it was a huge. We were started out as a cable movie that cost nothing to produce. I think this cost something like, and I'm like 3.8 or 4.2 directly. And we shot it like Hitchcock shot the original, all in the back lot. We only left once, and that was for the graveyard. So this cost literally nothing, and that was how, of course, Hitchcock had done the original. If we hadn't gotten Tony, we never would have had a feature film. The whole trick going in, Richard and I were trying to get it released as a feature. We had faith in the attraction of the property, but Universal didn't. It's like we've talked about that the major corporations have no idea about their catalog or the value of the catalog or the relative value of different movies within it. And this was one they certainly weren't aware of. Anyway, the trick in writing it was to write a part that was attractive enough that Tony would agree to do it again.
Right.
And so what I did here, and this comes off of the impulse you felt in the original, I made Tony attractive enough that Norman attractive enough that Tony would want to play him again, because the brilliance of the original concept from Hitchcock and the Tony acted was he was the first serial killer you felt sympathy for.
Yeah.
You felt sorry for Norman, and that was what made his Tony's characterization so brilliant. And so, so that was, here what you have is you have a poor man who's trying to hold on to his sanity.
Yeah.
And the evil people are trying to drive him mad again. And of course, the irony is at the end they totally succeed, and no one knows it.
Yeah.
And they get killed because of it. And this is going back to those, the torture begins here with the note left by Mother. This also was what's responsible for Mother, becoming the the horror, the nightmare that she became in absentia.
Yeah. And right here, we're going to see a little glimpse of Tony's son, Oz Perkins, playing
That's
young Norman,
perfectly right.
which is a nice little homage there. Now, let me ask you, when you got the writing assignment for Schyko 2, was there, I mean, this is, 82, there weren't that many sequels at that point.
No.
So was there any reluctance on your point tackling Schyko 2, or did you just figure, hell with it, I'm going to do it? I love Schyko, I got to write this.
That's a great shot there.
Yeah,
Look at
the
the hand coming out, mother dying. And that of course echoes back to Marty Balsam getting it and going down the stairway. And
now we're in the diner set.
that's
Richard Franklin
with
playing
his
the game.
with his back turned to us playing that video game.
There he goes. He acknowledged Norman. He turned for a second.
Yes, that's Richard doing Hitchcock, but he's much too thin. I'm sorry, ask the question
Oh,
again.
I was asking any reluctance on your part. Were you
No, I was scared to death, though, because we both knew that going in, that the critics were going to savage us for having the temerity to even do a sequel. And no, I know it's hard to believe now, but sequels were few and far between. And this was now an acknowledged, Schyko was now an acknowledged classic. When it was first released, Hitchcock's Schyko had gotten savaged in the reviews.
Right. Hard to believe. But
I know, but I mean, I've got them somewhere in the files because Richard and I dug all of them out of the Universal Publicity archives. We must have like 100, 150 reviews which are excoriating of the original.
Unbelievable.
Oh, well, the violence level, was just, considered at the time. And what year was it? 60, 61, 61?
Came out in 19. They filmed it in 59. It came out in 60.
60, okay. It was just, the level of violence, it shocked people at the time. And that's the emotional level of violence, like you saw in the opening montage of Norma Crane being killed in the shower.
Right. Well, we got to mention Meg Tilly here, who
Yes.
is Mary and is a fan favorite. Everybody loves, anybody that watches this movie loves what she did with this character, and her chemistry with Tony is just amazing, despite rumors of them not getting along, and we'll get to that in a bit. But, I was reading an interview with Richard Franklin that he did for the Schyko movies website, and he said that Jackie Birch had cast this, who also worked with you on Fright Night and cast just about everything in the 80s.
Right, it seems like it, doesn't it?
And Richard said people that auditioned for this were included Kathleen Turner, Carrie Fisher, Meg Ryan, Linda Hamilton. A lot of impressive, interesting young actresses came in for this.
I was there for the one with Princess Leia.
Carrie Fisher, okay.
Because I was fascinated, and I set in on that one. I mean, in other words, we wanted to cast her, and I don't remember why we didn't.
Okay.
And we went with Meg. I was also there with Meg when Meg read, and she was there was something so fresh and different. And she had done one horror film about a mausoleum.
It's One Dark Night.
There you go.
Yeah.
And otherwise, she hadn't done anything. And she was from Canada, and she was a ballerina, a dancer, something like that. But what she had was an openness and a sweetness, innocence. I don't know. You would feel worried for her being in a situation of danger. And here, of course, Tony is inviting her to stay at his place.
Right.
And we know who he is, and we assume she doesn't.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you would never in a million years think that she was, Norma Crane's daughter or the sister's daughter or conspiring against Tony, I mean, it's totally...
Right. Now, see, growing up on this movie, I'd watch a scene like this and just sympathize with Norman, but there was actually a screening of this at the New Beverly last year, and the dark humor, the laughs that this scene got, because we all know Norman's history, and it's like he's trying to get, he's trying to get Mary to come back to the hotel, unbeknownst to her what's happened there. So I feel like you and Richard had a dark sense of humor about this. So is it true? Did you try to inject a little bit of dark humor into?
Yes, and the line FOB was Richards, and free on. I don't remember what it meant now, but there's a little Australian humor in here as well. But yes, that was the idea. And here we are going to introduce the fabulous Dennis Franz,
Yeah, amazing to see him here.
who was not working, by the way, and who was not Dennis Franz yet. He had done a small part in Blow Up.
Yeah, the Brian De Palma movie Blow
That's
Up.
right, Blowout. That's it. Yeah.
And did Dress to Kill, did that happen yet? I feel like it was around the same time.
I think
as this.
it had happened.
Right, he was in that as well, which is fitting since it's kind of a Psycho tribute in its own way.
Right, and there, I mean, that Norman's hand reaches for the key where he had, with the room where he had done the murder.
Right.
And of course, we or the audience knows what's going on, but no one else.
Yeah.
I worked so hard to make sure that this stood solidly on the given circumstances of the original. In other words, there's nothing happening here that I added. It's all it's all working off of Alfred Hitchcock's original.
Right. Here's Dennis.
Danny, yeah, he's
One
just
of his sleaziest characters ever.
right.
He's so good at it.
So good, so good.
Yeah, I mean, you had told me about the writing process that every plot point was on an index card.
Yes.
And you had laid out all these index cards to make sure that everything legitimately added up.
I had every scene and why it was happening and what the motivations were on 2x4 cards.
Is that something you did often, or was it for this?
I did it when I was working with Richard. And I did it because he was a very literal-minded fellow. There was a lot of the college professor in him. And it just, he wanted to add things that were Hitchcockian. And so the best way to see it structurally was lay it out on a corkboard. Also, before I began to write, he and I watched every Hitchcock movie that we could get our hands on, including The Silence.
Wow.
And this is before DVDs, before VHSs. This is just at the dawn. Betamax and VHS were still fighting it out in 1982 and 3.
So did you get screenings arranged?
That's
at
right.
this?
Wow. We went down to Universal, which was an enormous luxury, to me, and they ran the Hitchcock films for us in the in the screening rooms at Universal. And what he did was he picked out all of the visual set pieces, and he showed me what Hitchcock had done with the camera in every one, and he wanted to echo the set pieces, and so. He taught me Richard did, how to add 3 to 5 visual set pieces per film. And I think I've pretty much tried to do it ever since. And that those are sequences where the story moves forward visually without dialogue.
This is great.
But look at that shot, that house up there.
beautiful.
I mean, my goodness.
Yeah, how surreal was it to be on the lot when you started shooting this? Because I know Hilton had said it felt eerily weird to him coming back all these years later.
The moment that I remember is walking over with Henry Bumstead, Bummy they called him, who was the great production designer, art director, walking over to the building on the side of the Universal lot where they kept all the architectural plans, and we went through these files. Me watching him, and he pulled out the original drawings of the Hitchcock house, of the Norman Bates house, and and they hadn't been disturbed for 22, 23 years.
Right.
And I mean, because they never rebuilt the house until we came along. This is where you feel so sorry for Tony,
Yeah, this is a great scene between the two of them. I just love how hard he's trying to do the right thing.
He's trying so hard to do the right thing, and then and later on he tries so hard to hold on to his sanity, and so it puts you, the audience member, in this odd voyeuristic position of sympathizing with the murderer.
I got to bring up this scene because Tony had talked about this in that footage that's in Schyko Legacy, the convention footage, saying the cutlery line is something he came up with during the reading with Richard. They were reading the scene, and without even thinking about it, is the first time he read it, he said he got to the word cutlery and stuttered cutlery, which gets a huge laugh anytime you see it with anybody. But yeah, apparently he says that's something he came up with in the reading, and then Richard is like, yes, you have to do that when we film it, which is great. Poor guy. Yeah, this rapport between the two of them.
Well, it's making it work, isn't it?
Hilton had also said, interesting side note, among the actresses, he thought Jamie Lee Curtis would have been perfect for this, especially considering her mother was the original Marion Crane. But at this point, she had already done 2 of the Halloween movies, so it seemed like it would have been a little distracting if she had.
I don't even remember her being considered for this.
Yeah, that's a Hilton Greed side note.
Well, Hilton would certainly know.
The toasted cheese sandwiches and milk. This is kind of a little. It's a fun thing that Schyko fans always say to each other.
Well, that's me, and well, that's Tony and me. That's this comfort food.
Yeah.
My mother always made me, Campbell's tomato soup and grilled cheese sandwiches. And Tony wanted, and this is him, he wanted a personal moment between the two of them. And this is so funny.
Yeah. Just hand him the knife.
Hand him the knife.
Again, huge laughs when you see this with an audience because they're like, oh my God, don't give him the knife. She's a little reluctant there, thinking about it.
Yes.
No, nothing's wrong. Yeah, and I imagine it must have been a great service for all of you to have somebody like Hilton on set who was there for the original.
Hilton was wonderful.
Yeah.
Hilton Green knew where all the bodies were buried. And he
Literally.
Well, he was the one that went over every lunchtime and had lunch with Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah.
When Mr. Hitchcock didn't have, somebody else there. And he was almost Hitchcock's keeper.
Yeah.
And this went through this was in the period of the decline, when his wife became very ill, and I'm not too. How can you tell stories out of school now? Hitchcock had begun to drink too much. He would have a big lunch and and a bottle of wine, and that was there to take care of the rest of the day. And Hilton was there for all of that, and and trying to hold them together.
Yeah.
Because Hilton was the first AD in all of his films. Also, Hilton's father was, Adolph Green, Al Green. Hilton's father directed, I think, The Jazz Singer, the first sound film. If you look up what his father directed, I think it was Al Green. You're not going to believe the number of films.
Yeah, son of Alfred Green, yeah. Let's see what he did.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they wouldn't have given me a job.
This is where he kind of confesses that he's had some quote-unquote problems.
Yeah, but it's a sweetness because Tony's reaching out, Norman's reaching out, trying to have a relationship with a girl,
Told you that I needed you to stay.
and you care about him,
Yeah.
Because this is the first
That's it.
time in this house.
That's what he does.
So what kind of conversations did you have with Tony when he first jumped on board? Because, I feel like he must have been reluctant at first to take this role. But then I had heard a story that he had done a spoof on Saturday Night Live, or like before this movie.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's on YouTube and it's hilarious. But he did a little spoof playing Norman Bates in a Saturday Night Live skit. And the story goes that Dan Aykroyd had said to him, wow, you were so great in that role, you should play it again. And kind of planted the seed in him. So I feel like once he saw your script and read what a great kind of arc you had for the character, he probably thought, wow, you know what, maybe I should play this again.
Well, that much is true. That was a great compliment to me, because the whole point of writing the script had been like it was like honey to try to bring him in,
Yeah.
because we didn't have him to start out with, and without him, we didn't have a feature film. So yes, and I think this was at a moment in his career when
There's the Hitchcock cameo, by the way,
that
on the right.
exactly
Right before the lights came on, there's a shadow of Hitchcock, which you and Richard put in there.
put in there because Hitchcock always made an appearance.
Yeah.
Think about the care
Yeah.
that went into this, and with Richard teaching me so much about Hitchcock at the same time.
Yeah.
It was, working with Richard was like having a graduate year to explore Hitchcock's films. And so much of this, the shots, the angles, so much of this repeats, what was in the original.
Yeah. In fact, I remember Andrew London was telling me a story that while he was editing this, there was one short period where Richard was not available, and he was having trouble figuring out how to edit a certain sequence. And then when he got Richard on the phone, he's like, no, it just plays back to that scene from the original. There were so many shots designed to kind of
Exactly.
homage and replicate what had been done in the original.
Exactly. I don't think there's ever been a sequel made with as much care, for the original, for the original.
Yeah.
Is this where he vignettes this at the end of the scene and pulls back out, and there's darkness to either side? Or maybe it's the toasted cheese scene.
That's going to be a little bit later. That's when he starts to get really confused. But here, it's the first night there sleeping. She's going to put a chair against the door. I'm sure she doesn't really trust being there. It's the first sign that something's up. Good night, Mary.
Anyway, there was I don't know. John Landis told me a story about meeting Tony. And this was after Tony had done all the Schyko sequels, and Tony was complaining that nobody thought of him anymore of doing anything but playing Norman.
Yeah.
But at this moment in time, he really wanted to get back and do the part again. This was sequels were not at this point in time, doing lesser films,
Yeah.
And that's the backlot of Universal.
And these were all sets, correct?
Everything.
Everything was a set.
Everything was a set. As I said, I think the only time we went off lot was for that graveyard scene.
And according to my notes, this was a 32-day shoot on the Universal backlot. You guys shot a lot of it on Soundstage 24, which was Hitchcock's favorite soundstage.
Yes, and Richard, I remember Richard taking me around and showing me. Richard knew, there's so much of a film, historian he was. He knew what films were shot on what Universal lots, on what Universal soundstages. And he took me on that soundstage where the House of the Opera, Phantom of the Opera, was shot.
Wow.
And they still had, I think it may still be there, but it didn't burn down, but they still had the seats and the balcony seats that folded down, and that had been there since like 1930 or something like that.
Yeah. As Dennis Franz comes to confront him. How did you feel? I mean, it must have been fun to write this character, but then seeing Dennis kind of bring it to life. How did you feel about his?
Well, I thought it was just great. I mean, look at the level of acting that you have going on. Look how a tip of the hat to Jackie Birch. She cast Fright Night too. The acting talent here is just sensational.
And you started out as an actor, so you know what you're talking about.
I do. But I mean, these are terrific character actors.
Yeah.
These aren't stars. Tony, you could say Tony was a star, but Norman's the character part. And you see everything you're playing. You're playing with I'm playing with the audience expectation. The audience knows he's crazy, and everything is pushing him closer and closer to the edge.
Right.
And so there's a suspense element.
Plus the way Richard directed this and Andrew cut it. Keeps cutting back to the knife, chopping the lettuce
All the time.
and the close-ups and all, it's starting to kind of build up.
all the time.
I also have to mention Lee Garlington right there is
Yes,
Myrna.
yes.
She also appears in the third one. And she had told me that she is the handwriting of Mother for all the notes that you find. Richard apparently was looking for somebody who had neat handwriting to write the notes to Mother, and apparently she was the one selected.
There you go.
So she's Mother in writing.
Oh,
There it is, see?
yes. Oh, that's great, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I mean, but look at his. He moves in and then he rises up.
Yep, just building the tension here.
Yeah.
Toomey getting more and more aggressive and kind of sleazy.
Would you mind removing your foot?
Yep, there we go.
Back to the knife cutting the lettuce.
Two turkey sandwiches on a whole wheat toast.
This is fun. I like the idea of Norman working in a diner.
But those are Hitchcock. Okay, that's high angle down, slight distortion. Before that, have been a slow move in. I don't, there's that shot in one of the Hitchcock films where he moves in on the piano player in the band. It turns out to have the twitch, the young and the beautiful.
Yeah.
The teenage film that he did. And this is Richard's doing Hitchcock here. I mean, everything or so much of it is there's the distortion again, the wide angle.
Yeah, and here's where it all explodes. Finds the note. She insults Toomey. Everyone else there starts getting nervous. Such a great confrontation.
And there we go.
Here we go on Schyko. Pick it up. Oh, who's that sneaky, suspicious character in the background?
Oh, I'll give you something else. Another fact. I did a movie as an actor called A Walk in the Spring Rain. And the woman who played my mother in that, and right now I can't remember her name, she was the voice of Mother in the original.
Virginia Gregg?
Virginia Gregg. So and I had done that in 1970, and this is 1982. I wrote this in 81, I guess.
Did you realize that right away? I mean, because I assume she probably did all her voiceover work after you guys had wrapped in post-production. Or was that something you figured out later?
No, I'm talking about Virginia Gregg had done the mother in the original Schyko.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know how I knew that or how I found that out. But I had acted in 1970 in the movie with the original mother, and I didn't know it. Things tying in this business.
Yeah.
There's nothing here.
Look, Norman, you're tired. Why don't you take the rest of the afternoon off? I'm telling you.
We're getting caught up in the movie here.
Well, you start to feel so sorry for the poor guy. Norman is trying to hold on to his job. He's trying to hold on to his sanity, to a life of normality. And there you go to another wide angle shot, and they're all looking at him, and nobody believes him anymore. I mean, I'm playing off the fact that you love Norman. And the ambivalent, there's a beautiful shot. And that's the shot that was used in a lot of the one-sheet stuff.
Yeah. Which I believe, I want to say Andrew London, the editor, had told us that he picked it because they were trying really hard to figure out a good image for the poster and a good tagline. And he's like, why don't we just use this still and say it's 22 years later and Norman's coming home?
I would believe that. The Andrew London and Richard acted as a team. They had been friends since they were both.
They both went to USC together.
They both went to USC together. And Andrew, who unfortunately can't be here today because he's across the country, but just a terrific job of editing. And look how appealing she is.
She's so beautiful, and just there's something sweet and innocent about her.
That's what she had when she came in to read. There was nothing, you knew you would feel, you knew you'd love her. You knew that you'd feel that attention because she was endangered by Norman, and you knew because she had such a nice quality that you'd never think.
Yeah, exactly.
That she was a bad person. trying to drive him crazy.
Yeah, you'd never suspect she's in on it at
Never,
all.
no, So it's playing against type. I mean, it's a love story, you know.
A bizarre love story, but it's funny because I know fans have said like,
But this is so funny. I'm gonna go to bed, take a shower, and go to bed. And he's like, ah. The whole story plays on that.
yeah. Again, it's a wonderful black comedy in that regard.
In that regard, well, you know, you go right to the closing moment, you know, which is
Yeah, and I believe Richard's going to recreate what is considered by most an impossible Hitchcock shot, which is the shot under the shower head, where the water is running directly into the camera, which I think Hitchcock achieved by adjusting, because let's see it when it comes up. But also like building the tension of like, is something going to happen in the shower again?
oh boy, it echoes everything, doesn't it?
Yeah. Which I mean, really, this movie, there it is, that shot. Like, how is the camera not getting hit by?
You
by the
know,
water from underneath?
that's a hell of a question.
That's a Hitchcock trick from the original.
Now here's the Hitchcock. Here's a.
Oh, this great reveal. Much like in the parlor in cabin 1, there is a peephole here.
But I mean, look at all the time he's taking to do this. And now he's moving in and zooming in at the same time. Look at that. I mean, I don't even know today if anybody would have the guts to take this much time on a shot, you know?
I doubt it. It would be hypercut and fast paced and all that. But again, this is one of those Schyko 2 is one of those rare cases where you could not have gotten a better group of people that were going to treat it with respect. You know, nowadays I don't know if this much care goes into a sequel.
Oh, look how lovely she looks and how young. Boy.
Yeah, we all kind of crushed on Meg. We all kind of wish that her and Norman ran off together. And
I know, lived happily ever after.
I would love to see the series go in that direction. It would be a lot of fun. Was there anything that you were surprised about that Meg brought to the character, or that you guys talked about at all, or did she pretty much follow it as written?
No, she did it as written. She was a love to work with. You know, for that matter, so was Tony. You know, the only thing Tony asked for was that little scene between her and him with the toasted cheese scene, which then I wrote, you know, in an afternoon. And
I always loved this. Tony was a really good musician in real life, and I love that in all the Schyko sequels, there's always a shot of him playing the piano. Which I'm sure he suggested. I don't know if.
Well, it also comes from his best friend, who was Stephen Sondheim.
That's right.
So he would sit around and play Stephen Sondheim songs.
I feel like that shot with Meg was maybe one of the first signs that she was starting to feel guilty about everything.
Yes.
And this was a shot you said that Tony Perkins requested.
That Tony wanted, yes. Well, Tony, I love him dearly, but he was not story-minded. He was mood-minded.
He had a very artsy European sensibility.
I always thought so, yes. He never understood narrative. I think you can see it in the one that he directed. But he understood, the emotional life of the character. But no, he wanted that scene of him looking into the mirror. I don't know why. But then he does. You could see that it's very European, like working with Orson Welles, know. But ideally, you don't have a scene that doesn't move the story forward. I mean, every moment has to keep the narrative going forward, but also everything. It either has to move the story forward or explicate character. And Tony was not aware of that.
It's also always fun revisiting the movie and trying to figure out exactly who is on the phone when. Like if you know the twist, Is it Lyla on the phone? Is it Mary? Is it Mrs. Spool? His
It's
real
Lyla. I think in my
and you're, you're the writer. You're going to define it now.
oh boy, I mean, but yes, it was Lyla or Mrs. Spool. But I can't remember which now.
Right.
But
Each
I mean,
time.
I certainly did have them covered.
Okay.
And then the kills were also very artistic. I mean, they also echoed Hitchcock.
But a little more graphic than you were used to seeing at this point because of kind of the slasher boom at the early 80s.
Yes.
So you guys were aware of Friday the 13th and all these movies that were kind of upping the violence. Because right now, Toomey's Demise, I love it, but it's definitely far more graphic than anything you'd expect to see in a Schyko movie. Boom. And also, I'm curious about if you recall Mother, who's right there, the whoever played Mother, because Hitchcock always had different actresses on the original playing Mother or being Mother. He actually morphed in, I think, up to four different voices so that you would never figure it out. So, do you remember? Did you have different people playing Mother in shots like that, and then later with Mrs. Spool? Or?
No, I think it was all Mrs. Spool. I think.
Well, I feel like Tony's double, Kurt Paul, may have played her in some shots. He definitely played Mother in all the shots in Schyko 3. But
Okay.
I feel like he might have said that he did some of them in here as well.
That Kurt would know. That I don't know.
I can't tell here, but I knew Mick Garris had told a story saying that he heard from Tony that when he played this character, he'd always wear shoulder pads to make himself look lankier than he actually was. I kind of can't tell. I mean, it looks like he might be wearing shoulder pads there, but
I don't think so.
it's a character tick.
No, I mean,
That must have been Mary. Mary who?
Yeah, I mean,
Tony was maybe Tony was, I don't want to say the smartest actor, but Tony was brilliant and extremely learned. I remember we played the movie game. You name a star, and then the other guy names a movie that star was in, and you just keep going back
right.
as far as you can. Well, Tony could play that with. Look at this shot. This is where she's putting the mascara in her eye.
The little
Tony,
spark on the background.
Tony could name cinematographers and composers in every movie ever made.
Right.
He had an encyclopedic knowledge of movie history.
Yeah, and in fact, I have a quote here from Richard Franklin saying that I needed a thesaurus to find the right words sometimes.
Yes, he was that erudite. But I think that a lot of that came from hanging out with Stephen Sondheim, because Tony and Stephen wrote How Awful About Sheila. What was it called? The on the one on the boat, the mystery movie.
Yeah, let me look that up.
The guy who directed, famous director, directed it. How Awful About Sheila, The Truth About Sheila.
Hi. Well,
That's where Mary meets
what Norman's
Loja.
Yeah, well, Bob Loja hadn't worked for a long time, as I remember, before this.
Yeah, this was the beginning. I talked to him, and he said this was kind of the beginning of his resurgence in the career.
That's
right. He'd
right.
taken quite a break, and then he did this, and
He never would tell me why he had taken the break, but I remember talking to him on the set, and he telling me he was coming back, and this was the first one.
and you were thinking of The Last of Sheila,
Last of Sheila.
directed by Herbert Ross.
That's right, and that was written by Tony Perkins and Stephen Sondheim.
Yeah.
And so those two guys played memory games all the time, and very, very involved games.
Yeah.
Well, the character actors here, the guy who plays the sheriff is just terrific too.
Yeah, and I think I remember Chris Hendry, who was one of your dear friends and who also stars in this, had told me that that this actor had actually started fairly late, his career in acting fairly late in his life.
Because the actor whose name I can't remember now, playing the sheriff, was taking off for a cruise with his wife when this was finished. It's funny the things you remember.
Yeah, it was Hugh Gillen, Sheriff John
That's
Hunt.
it.
And he also returned for Schyko 3. I always like to believe, I know this wasn't intentional, but there's a character at the very end of Schyko that looks a lot like Hugh. He comes in and says, "Oh, he's cold. Can I bring him this blanket?" And I always like to think that that is the same character because he says when he mentions Norman here, he's like, "Yeah, I was here when they brought him in back in 1960."
Oh boy.
So I'm sure it wasn't intentional, but as a fan, I picked up on that and thought that maybe, because it definitely does look like him.
There you go with another crane shot pushing in,
Yeah,
and he's zooming at the same time, and that's all Richard.
yeah, beautiful stuff.
Yeah, I mean, but video's killing this kind of moves. Because you that's the beginning of here. He's trying to. Oh my goodness, is that mother in the window? And he doesn't want to look. Look at Tony. I mean, that's so good.
Yeah, his acting.
Yeah, he's going to go to a shot of Tony the paintbrush dropping. 2 shots. Richard had boarded all of this out. I mean, we had discussed every shot while I was writing it because we were working off of the visual set pieces that Hitchcock had done.
And see, that's definitely, I've seen a publicity still in that, and that's definitely a stand-in that I don't recognize at all.
And it's not Kurt Paul?
No, it's just a woman in a blonde wig,
Okay.
just for this one shot.
I have no memory,
Movie looks gorgeous too, which we have to give credit to Dean Cundy,
Dean Cundy.
who, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, had shot probably all of Carpenter's best films.
Yes, and he was known as the Prince of Darkness at
Yes.
the time because he could get an image with the least amount of film. And then, of course, that title went on and was given to the guy who shot the Godfather movies, who also worked with very, very low light.
And this is where Norman finds Mother's room, up and back in order, the way it used to be.
But what you're looking at is you're watching one suspense sequence after another. I've been building suspense since he saw, Mother in the window, and this will turn into, I think all of a sudden, doesn't Mary interrupt him from behind and he whirls?
I think, doesn't he get, he's going to end up in the attic and get trapped there.
Ah, that's it. Okay.
Yeah. There's a beautiful shot coming up there, which was like a combination. But yeah, all her dresses are in order now.
Well, everything is back, and this room was every prop in it was explicitly recreated
Yeah.
off of the original.
I believe it was Jennifer Polito was the set designer, the set dresser on this movie, who recreated a lot of this stuff.
Wow. But that's what Richard was doing. Go to an overhead shot.
Oh,
Go to
great.
another overhead shot.
Great little homage to.
Great. Look at that. For the depth of the room.
Yeah, I mean it's amazing how accurately you guys recreated.
Give credit to Richard Franklin. Dissolved through into the attic.
Beautiful.
These kinds of shots is just these are crane shots. This is built on a set, pullbacks, push-ins. They don't have time for them today, and they don't have the money, and they're losing it.
Yeah. This is where Norman gets trapped up there. This is a great shot that I know Andrew explained to me at one point. He's going to look out the window here.
Yes. Did Andrew say how it was done?
I can't recall, but I know. So this is one shot, and then
That's
in the
on
crane,
a set. That's on a set. So we had to go into a matte shot. Is that what he did? I wonder.
Yeah, and here's the cut.
Yes,
Boom.
that's a matte, and that's a sliding. That line there.
Yeah.
That's how he's doing the slip switching. There you go. Look at that. And down to the kids.
And I imagine.
Look at that. I mean, now you're on a huge Chapman crane going 2 stories. He did a mash dissolve from being on a
set.
soundstage
Yeah.
into the exterior. Now we're back in a sound. That's a beautiful shot. That's all Richard echoing Hitchcock shots, because Hitchcock was in love with long crane shots, especially for suspense or psychological reveals.
So I love this. He already had the sleeping bag there, so you have to imagine that this is just something kids did pretty frequently.
Well, we knowingly are taking advantage of the then emerging horror movie cliche. If you have sex, you die.
Right.
And this was was us.
Yeah, this is the one moment that feels like it's right out of that time period.
Out of the 80s?
Teenagers smoking pot, about to make out, and something bad's gonna happen.
Yeah. Well,
But we always had our spots that we would break into when we were teenagers to do bad things, whether it be drink or.
well, this was influenced by Halloween. Halloween was 78. And and then now you'd started to have the. Yeah, it was turning into a cliche, and this is why.
You were just stoned. You didn't hear anything. This guy's trying to get busy. Yeah, again, all these. I'm pretty sure I went backwards in terms of seeing the Psycho movies. I'm pretty sure I saw these sequels and before I saw the original. So
Really?
maybe-
You think so?
I think so. I can't recall because again, I was very young when these came out, so this was my memory. And yeah, these scenes used to scare the crap out of me. Just the suspense and then the violence. Kind of setting up that that's not going to hold when.
Well, but look at Richard using inserts,
It's
to
great.
punch things all the time. Now you have there
Yeah.
you go. That's a scream.
Boom.
That was a scream in the movie theaters.
And then here she comes in. And it's great because you could still think it's Norman, but I mean, at this point, he's locked upstairs, and we're already so invested in him that I don't believe it.
Look at the
And
montage
that's great.
that Richard's putting together. With the flashing knife in the background. I mean, that's all design.
Yeah.
That's all storyboarded before it. And that's a matte
oh,
shot.
man.
That's an Al Whitlock matte shot.
That's great. I do have to say the one great homage that Tony did at the opening of Psycho 3 is you still see on the window the mark of the teenager.
Oh, you do?
That and Mary's book is just scattered in the dirt, the book that she reads through this whole movie. Just kind of abandoned.
Really?
Yeah, nice little callback to you guys. So he blacked out, which is,
He fell asleep.
well,
But he's claiming he's innocent. And we're playing her as, thinking he's losing it.
and the room's back to normal.
Norman? What? There's no note in there.
That's where it all starts to kind of
Starts
fall
to-
apart for Norman.
You're right, the room's been changed.
Wow.
This isn't how it was. It was all fixed
Got
up.
to talk a little bit about Lyla and her motivation behind this, which is not unjust. I mean, if you were in her position and your sister had been murdered by somebody and they were getting out, I can completely understand why they would want to do this to a person.
You see it all the time in people appearing in parole hearings and arguing against releasing the perpetrator because of it's revenge, an eye for an eye.
Had you, at the time that you were writing this, had you heard of any similar instances where, had somebody of this type ever gotten out of jail?
No, but I think it's a great motivation for a movie. And there's Hugh, and there's my best friend since high school, Chris Hendry,
Chris Hendry,
playing the deputy.
Deputy Poole, and
Deputy
he had told me that you guys both saw the original Psycho together.
My goodness.
Can you believe it?
Yes, now that you mention it, I know it's true.
What sort?
I mean, it's hard to remember, but Psycho, the original Psycho, there had never been a horror movie that was that visceral and that dependent on montage. And Hitchcock opened up the whole era of modern horror films with the original Psycho.
The cellar anyway.
And you've tried to sneak Chris into just about every one of your films, correct?
Everything I can, yeah. He usually ends up playing the newscaster.
Right.
I always seem to have a newscaster. He's in one of the Twisted Tales.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, the one called Shockwave with Angela Bettis playing the newscaster.
Oh, wow. That's pretty cool. The Cellar. This always gets a big laugh too. He just kind of just bends down and looks, and he's like, "Oh, well, it looks clear to me." Yeah, this is an interesting turn for Mary's character because, they could legitimately have gotten Norman here, but she ends up becoming his alibi.
And who did it?
I did. Several days ago.
Hey, Norman?
I just hate a dirty house, don't you?
So yeah, this is where she gives her alibi to him.
Why is this open?
Got to padlock that.
Better put a padlock on it before someone robs you blind.
Oh, boy.
You know why Norman doesn't come down here, don't you?
No, I don't.
Yeah, he was great as well. What a great character actor.
Oh,
It's kind of where he's explaining that this is where he kept Mother's corpse.
Himself and her
well,
voice.
the funny, I liked Hugh Gildem so much, I never saw him after this movie. Yeah.
That's right, it was. Let me ask you again. Are you positive you cleaned up that?
Okay, when you look at this, and it really is so much about casting and Jackie Birch. Because, I mean, it's one terrific character actor after another.
Yeah.
And the only name in it was Norman, was Tony. And Tony, at this moment in time, Tony had been almost a movie star back when he was a young man,
Right.
when he was a young lead. This movie, and he told me that, was a blessing and a curse.
The original second. you mean?
Yes, I mean, an international star, but it forever, took away the being the young,
Norman?
adolescent lead.
Right.
It changed how people, thought of him. Before Schyko, he'd been a romantic lead.
Yeah. And I'd heard he wasn't really happy being kind of. I mean, I actually have a Tony Perkins record from those days where he was kind of singing love songs. But,
Well, he'd done a huge Broadway play of Look Homeward Angel, off of the book, and he had done a huge movie with Gary Cooper, Shenandoah or something, Persuasion, Friendly Persuasion.
Friendly Persuasion.
And so he was a teenage heartthrob,
Yeah.
is what Tony was, and then he played Norman. He played Schyko in Norman.
Yeah.
and,
that
and,
changed
forever
everything.
took away the romantic lead. He had no idea when he did this. I think he came out from New York, shot for 3 or 4 days, went back to New York, and then came out again.
Yeah, I mean, he always notoriously says that he was in New York while they shot the shower scene.
Yes.
And he was just as surprised as the audience when that sequence happened
Yep.
when they first saw Psycho.
Yep. Tony had no idea that the original Schyko was going to be the classic or the huge hit that it was. You have to remember that when Hitchcock did it, the reviews were so vituperous. That's a big word for horrible. that now this is what Richard told me. Who knows if it's the truth or not? But Richard said that Hitchcock said.
Hold on, I think you're coming up, right? Yeah, who's that handsome devil?
That is me as a young man. My goodness, and that's back when I was working out and all of that.
You still look great, Tom. Come
Oh,
on,
thank
you're still
you.
in shape.
You're so sweet. Here's that wide angle again, right up against the face.
Now you were saying that Richard had looked up the.
Well, that Hitchcock was so shaken by the horrible reviews that actually for a couple of days he thought about recutting the whole thing. This is black and white now, and putting it on as one of the episodes in Hitchcock Presents. And then they went out and to the first screening of the first night, and the lines were around the block.
Right. Yeah, I heard they had debated cutting it into a two-parter for the show at one point.
Okay, because Hitchcock was so his confidence in himself was almost destroyed by how horrible the reviews were, and then there was this immediate overnight smash sensation.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing seeing all that newsreel footage of people lined up in New York.
Whoa!
The DeMille Theater in June of 1960, lines around the block.
And there you go.
And fun little side note, I got to be there when they were reshooting the premiere of Schyko for that movie Hitchcock. They were redoing that scene.
No
there.
kidding.
It was so much fun. It was like being in a time machine.
Okay, this is the big reveal.
Big reveal.
This is the big reveal where we see that Lyla is her mother, and that the two of them are trying. That Mary is in cahoots with her mother, trying to drive Norman insane, and now the daughter is defending Norman. She, now you start to like her.
Yeah.
And think of this: we could have a cigarette in those days. My goodness.
Yeah, so Mary is the daughter of Lyla and Sam from the first movie,
Yes,
who ended up getting together after the events of the first movie. And I feel like maybe Mary was pressured into kind of, because she'd never met, obviously she'd never met her aunt.
Yes, she's trying to back out.
Or Norman.
She's falling in love with her, at least coming to care for Norman. And she's trying to back out now, but her mother won't let her do it.
Yeah.
And so you are now skating closer and closer to tragedy. You know that this is not going to end well.
Yeah, I've always said all the Psycho movies have this weird kind of Shakespearean tragedy. You want so badly for things to work out, but you know that there's no way they're going to.
That was, yes, Hitchcock could do that. There was something. You're melding character with suspense and horror here, and so you're involved beyond simply watching kills or gore. You're watching the emerging fates of people you care about.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. She's like, yeah, I have to go. Norman needs me. That's how much of a change she's already had.
And I wish that I had spent more time and talked more closely with the actress, because she certainly knew.
And
Norma Crane, sister.
Oh, Vera Miles.
Vera.
Was it difficult getting her to agree to this as well? Because I'm not sure if she'd slowed down in terms of acting around this time period. I think
She had slowed down. She was living in Palm Springs. She told the story. Oh boy. Yeah. She told the story about being pregnant and not being able to do what Hitchcock movie, and that was where she missed her chance at stardom.
I want to say, was it Vertigo? I think she had to drop out.
It might have been Vertigo. It was one of the big ones, and it had been that close.
So I mean, obviously she did great work in the original Psycho, but because she dropped out, it seemed like Hitchcock, from the stories I've heard,
Hitchcock turned on her.
Yeah, they did not get along while they were making Psycho, and that was more of a contractual obligation that she had to do it.
She was a tough lady, that Vera Miles.
Yeah.
But she was a confident actress. She was not Tippi Hedren, that was a model.
Right.
The Hitchcock was not going to shove Vera Miles around.
Right. I believe you told me that she was very professional and very nice, but not warm and fuzzy.
That's a very, very good description.
Right.
She was a tough broad.
So was it difficult to convince her to do this, or did she respond to the script the same way Tony did?
I thought she responded to the script, and I remember her being very nice and very polite, but no, she wasn't warm and fuzzy. She was strong. She had been through the wars and she'd seen everything.
Right. Man.
I wish that I'd asked her for all the, I wish I'd asked her for all the personal Hitchcock stories.
Yeah. Oh, somebody's spying on Mary.
And you think, of course, that it's her mother, it's her own mother, but it isn't. It's the real mother.
And now, did you and Richard come up with that kind of twist and work backwards, or did that come later along in the writing process? Like, did you always think we are going to introduce a character that's going to be his real mother? That'll be where we'll get them.
Yeah, no, we knew that.
You knew it from the get-go.
We didn't know how we were going to do it, but we knew it.
Like, what if somebody else was Norman's real mother? That's an interesting twist.
Well, we ran out of possible suspects, because we were twisting it as we, at the same time as we went along, and yet we had to be faithful to the audience.
Mm-hmm. So you never had a version where it was Norman was the killer the whole time. You always wanted somebody else to.
Yes.
Right.
Because that was the irony of it. I mean, that they were trying to drive this poor guy crazy, and he didn't kill anybody. He didn't kill any of them until
the very end.
very, very end. That's right.
Yeah, Mary's got her gun.
I learned so much about filmmaking from working with Richard on this. I mean, he taught me so much.
Yeah.
Always indebted to him.
Yeah, and Richard was always very, very proud of this movie. I had a few interactions with him via email before he passed. Mm-hmm. He was extremely supportive of the Schyko legacy and always talked very highly of Schyko 2 as a high point in his career.
No, it was a labor of it was with him a labor of love because he was so influenced by Alfred Hitchcock. What happens is you're there with all this history, and when you're young and you're doing all this stuff, you don't realize it's history. You're constantly moving on. You know. That was one of the great shocks in the movies, I remember, when she looks up through the peephole and you're about to see it.
And I haven't gotten a clear-cut answer as to who this is on the other side, but rumor has it that it actually is Meg Tilly on both sides.
That I don't remember.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of looks like her it's such a quick shot.
I mean, it's supposed to be the real mother.
Yeah, but there's definitely a little bit of a play with the mind in terms of who it really is. But yeah, it's a great scare. And the few times I've seen it on the big screen, it always gets a huge reaction.
Huge reaction.
And
look at him build it,
yeah.
Richard. There you go.
Yep. This is where Norman discovers that that's there to begin with.
Right.
To me, it's like he notices the gun. He puts all this together. When he comes back in, there's a moment where he's going to say, "It's because of me that you have the gun." And he just looks so heartbroken.
Yeah.
Which is just the power of Tony and Norman Bates, how badly we feel for him that here it is.
It's because of me, isn't it? That's why.
Yes, the vulnerability.
Oh, heartbroken. And then he becomes a kid again. Hurry up or they'll get away. And he scurries down the stairs. So great. And here she goes to call the hotel to see if it is, in fact, her mother.
Mm-hmm.
This is Lyla Loomis, room 15, please.
Well, I'm looking at how often Richard gets back.
You're sure she has
So you get the production value of the house, and how often he's on wide angle and he's up high or he's down low.
Okay, Mom,
Yeah.
where are you?
I mean, for the time, was 32 days seems adequate nowadays for a feature of this sort and budget. I mean, but back in 1982, did that seem, how did that seem on your end?
Well, it seems adequate right now. Back in 1982, I don't remember.
Meaning, did you feel rushed at any point, or did it seem like you guys had ample time to accomplish what you were out to accomplish?
It felt like we had ample time. I mean, this is all back lot. We did this the same way that Hitchcock did the original. What's amazing is that the film cost so little. It was around $4 million, and it made something like over $100 million worldwide, which was real money back in 1983.
Yeah.
What is
Yeah, and I mean, it came out in the summer, so I mean, with a lot of other big event movies, and yet it was a pretty big hit. Were you guys? I'd like to think that you wanted it to be successful, but were you guys pleasantly surprised by just how big it got?
Very. Well, what we were so surprised by or heartened by was the worldwide interest in Tony playing Norman Bates again.
And what's your memory of seeing this for the first time? Was it like a cast and crew screening? Did you go to a premiere? Was the reaction to it fairly instantaneous? Did it play the way you expected?
Yes, all of those things. What I remember, and I wasn't there, was the big New York premiere
At Studio 54, I believe,
Yeah,
at the party.
they made a big thing out of it, and there was a lot of memorabilia like keys.
Yes,
You know,
I have a set of keys that were
Yeah.
your invite.
Yeah.
I'll protect you.
But yeah, it must have played great. And again, this Tony at his absolute best in terms of acting.
Well, I look at this and look at how handsomely it was shot,
Yeah,
and it's a good-looking film. There's nothing that looks cheap or cheesy or grindhouse about this at all.
yeah,
And this is acting. You know, I mean, you're looking at scene after scene, which is kept alive and pushed along by the acting.
and then this is going to be the scene that you had mentioned that Tony requested you add. She's going to go to sleep, and he's going to watch over her, and then have a little moment where he talks about all the memories that were stripped from him at the institution,
That's what he wanted.
except for this one memory of his mother making the cheese sandwiches, which is what Mary smells like. It's actually very sweet.
It is, but he wanted this.
And it's pretty much the only addition to the script, correct? You guys
Only-
pretty much
only-
stuck to...
Only one. It's the only one. I mean, this script was so well planned and boarded out. Richard and I
Norman, put the knife
drew
down. Nobody's gonna-
every shot out. Storyboarded this ourselves as I was writing it.
Did it come together fairly fast? I mean, did you have enough time to write it, or was this one of those assignments that you just were kind of gunning and
No,
going for?
I had no. I had enough time on this one. I can't remember, but I can't remember how many weeks it took now. But he came over to my house every day for, I don't know, 3-4 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, Richard was not somebody that, he was not particularly script oriented, or story oriented, but because this script had so many visuals in it, and he was echoing Hitchcock's entire oeuvre, he was involved with the outlining, not the writing, but the outlining. He came over and sat with me for several weeks as I outlined it. And then he was looking at everything as the scenes came together. Richard was looking at a way to take and shoot them that would echo the visual set pieces from the original Hitchcock films, which he had studied already. And he also gave me books on Hitchcock criticism, like one by Robin Wood, I think. There were several books of Hitchcock criticism that he had me read.
Just remember the good
Here's that moment. It's so great. I think this is one of my favorite scenes or moments in all the Schyko movies. It's just very sweet. And there's actually a promotional still of this, of Mary holding Norman, that a lot of fans seem to love. I know I do.
Okay, this is on a sound stage. This is Richard vignetting the scene. So he has this room built up, I don't know, 4 or 5, 6 feet off the ground. So he can pull back out, and you get the blackness surrounding that.
Dissolve right to the house. Yeah, again, the filmmaking skill involved in this is really impressive.
Well, I don't think that Richard ever got the chance or took this much time with anything else. And I think that was because of because it was based on a classic and his overwhelming respect for Alfred Hitchcock.
And then you guys went. Did you guys go right into Cloak and Dagger? Because I know you worked together.
Right into it.
Right.
Into it. Yep.
Yeah.
Because we got hot off of, this made us, hot. So, we were able to to go right to another movie. And also,
Do you remember Lyla Loomis?
once again, we had some control. This one we had total control because nobody cared. I mean, this was such a low budget film, that there wasn't a lot on the line for the studio.
Yeah.
That's when Mary went to town.
And I mean, they were totally shocked by the quality and how much money it made.
This is where Dr. Richmond kind of tells everything to Norman.
They're the ones who've been reading the notes.
Oh boy, yeah.
He seems he seems to be taking it well. A little confused, a little hurt.
Norman, like mother, like daughter. You know how Lyla Loomis feels about you. She can't wait to see you reinstitutionalized. That's why all this is happening.
Making some coffee for Dr. Richmond.
They want to destabilize you, to undermine your sense of reality.
And explaining everything.
We can't do that. Good. Glad to hear you say that.
These two must have gotten along pretty well. And I know Robert said that his interactions with Tony were that he was very professional and they got along well enough. Weren't exactly buddies, but they were both at the same level of professionalism in terms of approaching their characters.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And there's just something about Loggia that in every movie, he's just so darn good.
I've seen it.
Yeah, I remember Bob telling me he was coming back after being off for a while. I should have asked him why he was off. I'm sure there's a story there too.
Mary Loomis?
And you have to remember, Tony at this point had 2 young children and was happily married, and was also, had made a commitment to family.
Yeah.
So I mean, he went home every night to that family too.
My mother spoke to me downstairs.
I mean, right before this.
Yeah, Loggia playing every moment, making something out of it.
Yeah. Pulling out the glasses. Poor Norman. I believe this is where he makes the claim that if he proved it to Norman that his mother was dead, would he accept it? And she said he would. This is great the way you set this up, is them having the fight in front of the guy in the background there.
So he can testify
Oh
later.
yeah, we'll see him at the end of the movie.
I was here when they shot that.
Where was this? Was this a location or a set?
No, that's a set, but it was a standing set. It was an old standing set that they redressed on the lot.
That would be a help.
What are you talking about?
About what you're doing to Norman. You were in that house last
Now
night.
this is where
Was not.
she brings up the bloody towel and all this other stuff that.
Well, she thinks her mother's lying now. And
Yeah.
and we as an audience member are starting to say, well, who's doing all this? Who's watching Norman? Because we all assumed it was Vera Miles. And now Vera's denying it. And her own daughter doesn't believe her. The other thing I'm seeing is a lot of inserts that Richard used,
Yeah.
in his cutting pattern.
That's all it's going to take. I'll have the police and a doctor out there before you're in any danger. Then they'll have to act on our petition.
Mother, I signed all your petitions. I've been
Did you get to talk to a lot of the cast after the movie came out? People like Anthony and Vera for their reactions? Were they? I think Tony was pretty happy with the way the movie came out.
Tony was very happy. He's the only one I remember seeing after the movie. Yes, he would, well, because it revitalized his career again.
Right.
He'd really frittered a lot of the commercial out, and he blots it out with the vacuum going on. But he'd done this is the one time we left a lot.
Right. To do this scene.
Yes, the graveyard scene. Tony had lost a lot of his commercial viability because he'd been doing art films in Europe for years, which was really his preference.
Right.
I mean, he had that sensibility. He did not have a particularly commercial sensibility.
Right. He would do a few, like he did The Black Hole, which is a big Disney movie, shortly before this. But he would go back and forth between doing a project like that and then, other things.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this confuses me because I always remember this scene in the movie, but I believe Andrew London, the editor, had once said that this was the one deleted scene not in the theatrical cut. But again, I always remember this in the movie every time I've seen it.
Me too.
Yeah,
Me
so
too.
I don't think it's a deleted scene.
No, I don't
and
think.
that mother's corpse right there, there's a gentleman named Guy Thorpe that owns it, that actual prop. And he told me he got it from the effects artist, and I believe they also used it as one of the corpses at the end of Poltergeist, Tobe Hooper's Poltergeist. It pops up.
Whoa, who knew?
So in Poltergeist and also Mother.
Who knew?
A lot of history.
That corpse has been around.
Yeah. God, it's so weird to see Norman in almost this domesticated relationship. Mary's cooking them lunch. And they're having their first little confrontation about who she really is.
Not unless she's a ghost.
She's a ghost.
He says it's you and your mother. He says your last.
I mean, I guess we have to address a little bit. I mean, watching the movie and growing up on the movie, I always felt that the chemistry between these two was unbelievable. I mean, you really believed that Mary cared for Tony, and likewise. And the rumors always were that they did not get along at all on set. And you know a little bit about it, but
A little bit.
what I've heard was that Meg Tilly was fairly new in the business and did not know that Tony Perkins was a seasoned big star. And that maybe at one point Tony took offense that she didn't know how famous he was, quote unquote. And that because of that, he kind of didn't like her very much and tried to get her removed from the movie.
Well, he certainly did. That was the big kerfuffle during the making of the movie. Halfway through, he wanted her replaced.
Halfway through.
Yes.
That seems like it'd be very difficult to replace.
Extremely difficult. Everybody had a small heart attack,
I mean, but it wasn't like it didn't seem like that could have possibly ever actually happened halfway through the shoot. I mean,
No.
he didn't threaten to like walk or anything like that, right?
No, but he got angry at her because of some scene that he said she wasn't playing right. And it might have been the toasted cheese sandwich scene. I can't remember, but it was in or around there. We were too deep into to in any way replace her.
Right.
And and I don't really know what the reason for the friction was. It wasn't on her part; it was on his. He was the one that was objecting. She'd never really worked before,
Right.
so
And I mean, according to interviews I've seen with Richard, he sat in on some of the readings, Tony Perkins that is, and really approved of the casting of Meg Tilly initially. So he liked her at first.
I was there when she read, and it was just Richard and I. Maybe he introduced her before he cast her to Tony. I don't know, but I remember that her reading and her vulnerability was why we cast her, because you'd be sympathetic and get involved.
Yeah, I think they might have just initially read some scenes together. That's where the cutlery story comes from. That was something that Tony, Richard, and Meg were sitting and reading before production.
That makes sense.
But yeah, again, you would never be able to tell that there was any kind of friction at all between these two. And it seems like it was at least kept professional, because Hilton, who was a producer on this, said that it didn't interfere with the shoot or any of that. You guys were still on schedule and got everything done.
It was very professionally handled, because Hilton was a very, very strong, line producer. I mean, Hilton was the AD on the first one when Tony did the first one as a kid.
Yeah, and in that 20 years, he'd amassed quite a career.
Quite a resume.
Yeah. Yeah. There's your buddy Chris snooping around.
And there they did now the two of them. Mary and Norman have all's come out. Now we're going to go out for the famous,
The swamp. The original swamp where everything was dumped in the first one.
That's right. And I'm in that scene.
Yeah, you are. You and Chris Hendry got to share a scene together. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the phone rings again.
Mm-hmm. Boy. But look at what every scene Richard
And we see
is,
that it is in fact Lyla this
Lyla.
time.
every scene, you know, Richard's doing it with the camera. And this was on the back lot.
Universal backlot there.
But every scene, you know, Richard's taking a movie with no production values, really. I mean, you know, probably 90% of it takes place in a house.
Yeah.
And he's making the camera come alive and putting production value in it.
Yeah.
And this is the, you know, I remember this reveal. Richard
Loges.
learned that doing television series in Australia. That kind of a shot. That's a crane shot too.
Loja is hot on her trail. And we're at the swamp where they're going to...
Yes, and this had been used for some TV series.
Well, this is the infamous swamp on the Universal backlot, which I believe was the same swamp in the original Psycho.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, I believe Mick Garris told me they shot some of Creature from the Black Lagoon there.
Whoa. I remember them using it for a TV series called something like The Golden Monkey or something, that maybe even Roddy McDowall had been in,
Wow.
which was sort of a ripoff of Indiana Jones, or influenced by that. It was a well-used swamp, let me put it that way.
Yeah. Great production value, so yeah, they just ask him his questions, let him go. But not her. They immediately become, her and her mother immediately become the suspects. Which I always liked, that everybody in the movie, including the sheriff and the diner people, wanted to give Norman a chance, a fair second chance.
So I've been wondering if it's possible that
But look, Rich is staying there. He's not even cutting to overs.
Yeah.
I
Nice long take.
don't know if he covered it with overs.
And
Yeah, there we go. There's an over. So he did.
And I never noticed it, but Mary actually asked, could it be a possibility that Norman was adopted? It's the first clue that maybe Norma Bates was not his mother.
And I'd forgotten that.
Yeah.
I don't see any point in either of you staying around Fairvale any
It's
longer.
asking her
Yeah, now
politely
the sheriff
to
saying,
leave.
"Get out of town, lady."
Or else.
None that are on the books.
Yeah.
Whole hell of a lot of it
Not breaking any rules on the books,
like all
but
the ones having to do
a
with
whole
right or
lot that
wrong.
have to do with right and wrong. It's great.
Say you and your mother just
I'm a moral person at the end of everything.
Yeah. It's funny, we've talked about the script. I've read your original script for it, which is beautifully written, by the way.
Thank you.
And I believe you've gone on record saying you think it's the best script you've ever done.
I certainly worked harder on it than than anything else I've ever written. I mean, you know, but it was because I was so terrified. That's me in the background there.
Yeah.
Because I was so terrified of being savaged by the critics.
Right.
But you know, I probably held it in greater regard than most of the critics. I mean, I was awed at the chance of writing the sequel to Psycho,
Yeah.
the most influential horror film in my lifetime, and maybe in
Still is. to this
yeah.
day.
I mean, it was.
And, it's funny because it was a hit. It did well at the box office, and the original was kind of torn apart by the critics. What was the criticism like for Psycho 2 when it came out? Do you remember it all? Well, I mean, was this well received by critics?
Yes,
or?
yes, it was well received. I wouldn't say it was brilliant raves, but it was very well received. I do remember going and doing a panel at the Writers Guild after it had come out, and Robert Bloch was on the panel with me.
Right, the author of the originals.
Of the original, and Robert Bloch complained.
While you were on the panel?
He complained about the level of violence in specifically this shot.
Oh, yeah,
And-
this is by far the most graphic thing in the movie.
That's right, and this was done by Richard for an audience.
Ooh, boom.
There you
Really
go.
nasty kill.
Yep, that was done. That was done because the audience had become more attuned to slasher, and that was our nod to slasher film.
Yeah, I mean, 1982. That you got to do something shocking, and that's definitely shocking for that time period. I mean, I can't believe you guys convinced Vera Miles to do that.
Well, that I can't. I wish I could remember. She wasn't. I don't know how how he convinced her to do it. That's a good question.
Yeah,
Because that would have been in bad taste for her.
I mean, it had to have come up. And I mean, was it described like that in the script? Her getting a knife in the mouth? Yeah.
Yes, we deliberately did it that way, and we did it also with the kill of Bob Loggia.
Oh my, that has got to be the most
Yes.
cringe-inducing kill of the whole movie.
Uh-huh.
We'll get to that in a little bit.
But I don't know if we would have gone to that level of violence if it hadn't been for the emerging, ethic, of violent kills, which my memory was specifically started by Halloween.
Yeah, which ironically enough is for the most part a bloodless movie.
Very mild.
You don't see it, but everything that it influenced kind of took it up a notch.
Yes, it did. It kicked it up.
We know what's behind those coals, but we're not going to say just yet. Our dearly departed Lyla.
I wish I kept the model for that, because that's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a behind the scenes still of an entire, I guess,
Bust.
a bust of Vera's face. And like a little pump that was what they used for the blood. But I always like this, the little hidden tile which held the knife and the wig. Here's Norman. I just love the way this is all lit too.
I followed Lyla Loomis from
Maybe subtly pointing out the darkness in Norman, slowly emerging. I love how passive he is about everything too. Lila's down here? Oh. You followed her here? Well, where is she now?
She was the one that was dressing up as your mother. How? Oh, she wasn't going to do it again. Why would she sneak into your...
Now, anything stand out for you about just being on set in general? I mean, you got to spend the majority of your time on the backlot here, watching them make this movie, which I don't know. I mean, you obviously had a great relationship with Richard, and you were the writer. I don't know if they offer that kind of access to writers these days to be on set as much as you got to be, but it must have been kind of an amazing experience to watch this unfold.
It was, but you know what I remember is Richard taking me around the lot and taking me to this soundstage and that soundstage and pointing out what movies have been made there.
Which also, you had told me that Roddy McDowall did that for you on Fright Night as well.
Roddy was much better at it than Richard was, because Roddy had lived it. Richard had learned it from books and from teachers at USC.
Right.
I mean, that was his life.
Yep. You guys.
This is a replication of the original shot.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because the original movie ends on that shot.
That's
and
right.
then pulling it out. Yeah, so here's where they find Toomey's car. Here's you and Chris about
Me
to.
and Chris, yeah.
Which is there's a great story I read from Richard Franklin where he said that him and Dennis Franz had a lot of laughs. They got along really, really well, and that Dennis joked that that the twist should be that he's an undercover agent that's outing psychos across the country, and that Toomey would show up at the end and be like, I got it all figured out.
Yeah.
So, but unfortunately, this is where Toomey really is. It's a shame. And this is great. It really builds towards this pretty amazing third act.
He's going cuckoo. That's what Norman is slipping away.
Yeah.
And this is where she realizes it for the first time.
Car in the swamp. I don't know. They just found a car.
Yes, this is kind of
For them to arrest him.
this is the moment where we know for sure she's completely frantic and he's calm as all hell. Where would we go?
Get a car.
Where would we go?
Somewhere, anywhere. Norman, please hurry.
Yeah. Again, a true testament to some actors who were just born to play certain roles, and whether Tony considered it a blessing or a curse, he was kind of born to play this character. Right?
I can't think of anybody else, can you?
No. Other people have tried.
I know, guys. I told you John Landis claimed at the end that Tony said it was a curse, but he certainly didn't feel like it in this. And And the other thing is that this was a terrific experience for everybody involved, except for the momentary, dust up between Tony and her. It was a very, very happy production with everybody working smoothly and well. And Richard certainly knew what he wanted with every shot. We used to draw these things out when I was writing it.
Now, this is the moment where we know for sure he's lost it because Dr. Raymond is calling him, and he's going to start referencing her as mother. This is it. He's officially snapped. Your fictitious mother.
Lyla Loomis has used this phone to call your house.
Yes, I understand. Mother.
There it is.
Norman, this is Dr. Raymond.
I've been waiting.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, he's gone.
Dr. Richmond hangs up. Mary hears that there's nobody there. And her one-ditch effort is she's going to try to get on the phone and pretend to be mother to kind of try to snap him out of it, which is not going to work. This is also a great audience moment because we see him talking and
Nobody's there.
nobody's there. And he's like, you want me to kill her?
And the slow move in.
Yeah. I mean, the way that Tony plays it too is you definitely can tell he's lost it here. Whereas the whole time he's just confused and sympathetic, but here, the slow.
Oh, look at the eyes.
Yeah.
Look at the eyes.
Killer. I love this shot right there.
Have to?
She's freaking out, not sure exactly what to do. She's going to make her best effort to dress his mother.
And try to shock him out of it.
Yeah.
And look at Richard going again. I mean, the shots. See, today you wouldn't have the. They would argue that it was too slow.
Right.
And you'd have to do a direct cut to the face and the coal, and not to the.
No, but I mean, this reveal is so beautiful. And creepy, just seeing the little tiny bit of her face back there.
No, Mother, please.
But yeah, this image always reminds me of my. I've had this Halloween costume several times throughout my life. The old wig
you
and
have?
dress. Yeah.
Oh.
It's the cheapest costume ever because my grandma dresses like mother, so it would just borrow one of her dresses, get a $6 wig,
Right
and
up there.
you're done. You got a
Oh.
great Norman Bates.
Cheaper than the Chucky costume, right?
That'd be too complicated. But yeah, here it is, man. And I think this is the point where the audience is on the edge of their seat, like, oh my God. He thinks he's talking to mother. She's right there in front of him.
Norman, hang up.
Man, he's gone. Mad as a hatter right here.
The phone in an instant.
She realizes that she can't bring him back.
She's going to get on the phone.
This is your mother.
And everyone's probably forgotten at this point that Dr. Richmond is in the house too.
Norman.
I think this is a moment that Meg Tilly really brings it. She's really scared, concerned. She starts crying on cue. Look at that. Beautiful.
Norman, please say something.
And a little heartbroken. She seems like she really
It
is
is.
taking this hard that Norman is.
She's trying to do it right, and everything is going horribly wrong.
And here's
it's a-
Dr. Richmond behind her.
And it's about ready to even go more wrong.
Stabbed him. And as if that wasn't enough.
Here we go. That was gratuitous.
Oh my
And
God.
deliberately so.
Yeah. But, yeah, Andrew tells the great story of when they were editing that, and Hilton and Richard were in the editing suite, and they were just quiet for a second and then burst out into laughter. They couldn't believe how beautifully that worked.
It's all right, Mother.
I think, yeah, and there's another moment that always got me too here coming up, where she's going to pull the knife out to defend herself. And there's a moment where Norman reaches out, grabs the knife
Oh,
blade,
yeah.
and
Well,
pulls.
that everybody goes,
Gets everybody every time. She's going for it, yeah.
And I'll cover up.
And again, I love the way Meg Tilly plays this, is that she doesn't want to do this, but it's at a point where he's just so far gone, he doesn't even feel it.
Well, it's when he grabs the knife, which
Yeah,
is
this
the
is
next
it, right?
shot. Ah!
Oh, God. It's the worst.
Oh.
And he finally accepts, he thinks that this is Mother now that he's caught her in front of a body.
Yep.
I don't want to hurt you, Mother, but they're coming.
The thing doesn't stop, does it, once it starts?
No, right here.
Hurry.
They're coming. You're going to hear the sirens come up. And still to this moment, she's completely concerned. Norman, you're bleeding. Please stop. Until she sees her mother. Which is amazing, is because unfortunately she's going to... her final moments are going to be thinking that he was crazy all along.
You did it.
There it is.
They're here.
They're here.
Let me help you.
You killed them all.
Oh, Chris Hendry taking her out.
Ah.
And what always disturbed me about this is that she didn't actually die from that shot, because they reference.
This is the courthouse square where they shot Back to the Future.
Yes, this is the clock tower. This is on the Universal back lot.
That's right. Before it was the clock tower.
Yeah, they made it. Mm-hmm. They made it into that. And there was a fire in the Universal back lot a couple years
Yeah,
ago.
that's right.
So it was
Destroyed it all.
damaged, but they did rebuild that. So the courthouse from Psycho 2 / clock tower is back up and running. But yeah, somebody references here that the whole way to the hospital before she died, she kept saying it was Norman. So it's like, oh man, she didn't even die. It's like she died slowly. It's just so horrible. This guy. Can I get a cup of coffee? Everybody here's got coffee, I see. It's great. You know, I like this because this kind of homages back to
The
the ending of the original,
Yeah.
where
Simon Oakland's explaining to
explaining the whole
everybody.
thing. Yeah,
Except here, of course, everybody's totally wrong.
yeah. Oh, the irony. And quite frankly, I love it because you could feasibly end the movie right after this scene, and I wouldn't say be satisfied, but at least be like, all right, that's Psycho 2. But then you guys had one more trick up your sleeve.
You had to pay off who was really doing it
Yeah.
to have it all make sense.
And again, the notorious story is that you guys held that last 5 pages from everybody.
Yeah, that's true.
So it was just you, Tony Perkins knew, Richard knew, and
That was it.
yeah, and I believe the version of the script I saw has the note that says the final 5 pages will be distributed prior to shooting.
That's right. Well,
Yet mine has the 5 pages.
Oh, it did.
Yeah, I believe I have a copy of Richard's script, which has the 5
I
pages.
think
in
you
there.
do because you got that from Andrew London.
Yes, thank you, Andrew,
Thank you, Andrew.
and the blueprints as well, the ones you were referencing earlier.
Do you have those?
I got the blueprints from Psycho 2.
Do I have those?
No, I don't think so. You've got other cool stuff though.
Then someday I have to get those prints from you.
Yeah, here we go
Oh yes.
to the finale.
Well, there was great inspiration behind this.
Yeah, talk about this because again, it was kind of you had said that you believe you poisoned her.
We poisoned her, and then Richard came up with the idea of using the shovel. And what that did was that turned it into a shocker, but also it had a black humor to it.
Oh yeah,
And a huge laugh of relief at the same time.
yeah,
I mean, and I don't know how Richard got that idea, and I was worried that it was too over the top, but I had left it just with the poisoning.
yeah,
But it was Richard's instincts were 100% correct, and it was absolutely right.
yeah. You just needed a little something more to really punctuate that moment, and I mean, what a shocker! You could kill people in horrible ways in the early '80s. But you would never think to hurt a sweet little old lady in such a violent, vile way.
Well, it's mother, isn't it? I mean, there's something
Yeah.
psychological in this because he's trying to kill off his mother, and I think every young man has to psychologically do something like that to be, to assert their own, adulthood.
But setting it up, he's got the shovel here, pulling in the coal.
Yes, and breaking the a bandage.
The bleeding hands, yeah. It's a great setup because he seems so lonely and lost now that everything has gone down. Yet when we see him in a moment, he's got dinner prepared for two, as if he's expecting someone.
So he still believes, he's mad as a hatter and he believes his mother.
Yeah.
And he's waiting for mother. But he's lost the person that he might have loved, which is Mary, you know?
Yeah.
It's really tragic.
There's the second plate.
And he's back with his grilled cheese sandwiches.
And I'm sure the audience went nuts for that. So, here's the real mother.
Yes.
Here's
and
who's been
there's
responsible.
another one, that's a match shot, and that's, you know, the sky's been, you know, cloud tank to get that. And everybody's waiting to find out who it is.
Yeah. And you don't notice it as much on the first viewing, but on repeat viewings, when they're at the diner, Richard does cut to solo shots of Mrs. Spool, which kind of gives a little bit of an inkling as that she's up to something. But I do like the backstory that you set up, is that she was also institutionalized, which kind of
Inherited.
shows that it was inherited. And I guess the whole family's kind of crazy then.
I think that's a safe bet.
Yeah, if the sister who raised Norman was, he turned out the way he did because of that. So it's so odd because this woman is so sweet,
So nice.
yet we know she's done terrible things.
And he's going to his special, you know, to his special tea.
Specialty. This is Claudia Ryar, who played Mrs. Spool.
Are you really my mother?
The name Spool doesn't mean anything to you?
No, should it?
It was Norma Bates'
This is where she
maiden name.
explains the whole thing. Her
The
maiden
woman you
name.
thought was your mother was my sister.
This is kind of crazy. I mean, what did you guys think of this?
Quite a lot.
Well, I had to explain it somehow, didn't you?
Yeah.
Baby, especially being by myself.
But I mean, there's so little in the original movie that we know about his mother and
Put me away for a while.
and her backstory. I mean, it's alluded to, but it's mostly stories told by Norman, which, quite frankly, could be, it doesn't, he could be an unreliable narrator for those stories. So it's interesting that you had plenty to play with in terms of the backstory.
Well, you need to have this so it makes sense. Because who could it be? Because now everybody's dead.
Yeah, it can't be just a random person.
No, okay, no, it couldn't be. So.
And did you ever read? Did you avoid Robert Bloch's Psycho 2 completely? The book
Well,
version.
You couldn't use it. He killed Tony off like in the first 30 pages.
Yeah, it's an unadaptable version.
Unadaptable, the most
Do to my poor little boy.
commercially misplaced,
Uncommercial version of what the story could be.
uncommercial. I don't know why Robert Bloch did it. And
I feel like I can't speak for him, obviously, but I feel like he might have had a love-hate relationship with the Psycho series.
Well, maybe, but you have to remember how big Robert Bloch was. He was one of the 2 or 3 prime influences on Stephen King.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I think he wrote some of the Amicus films.
Mm-hmm.
You know, now here we go. And this was a huge shock for the audience.
Oh my God!
And she starts to gag in the tea and...
Boom, out. Were you there when they shot that by chance?
I don't remember.
Because you had a ton of Polaroids that you took yourself while you were making the movie, which are all amazing.
Right, which I gave to you, which you have in the documentary.
Yeah, you see a lot of those in the documentary. But I believe Andrew explained that this was a combination of cuts, of very clever cuts, but that Claudia, the actress, had a helmet on.
Was that it?
Well, the wig was a helmet, so the shot of Tony hitting her was like a styrofoam thing, but then they cut to an actual dummy where he hit with a real one.
There you go.
And kind of intercut it all together.
Okay, I knew that I wanted to get to this. This is how he's right back where he started.
Yeah.
He puts mother
Oh, yeah.
up in the window again.
Yep.
This is such. Gosh, I did this so good.
Yeah, and I love this dialogue, which you were telling. I think you joked. You're like, "This is what my mother was like to me."
This is me taking out all of my neuroses about my own mother.
Yeah.
And and he's doing both voices now.
Yeah.
Tony is, and look at that. You just stay there, and the horror of the dialogue just plays over.
Filthy girls
Oh,
again.
he'll never leave mother, will he?
No, this is my favorite line where she's like, "Stop gawking at me. What do you expect us to live on? Hope?"
Oh, that's so me. And I want to say this to thank you very much, Rob Galuzzo, for doing this, and thank you everybody out there in the audience and fans who are listening to this.
Yeah, great moment is that you end right at the last shot where he's in front of the motel and we see her in the window. Just as it cuts, we see the clouds in the background. It's going to start raining, which is exactly how we find Norman in the original movie. It just starts raining when Marion pulls up to the motel.
Right.
So it comes full circle. Exactly. It leaves us, right there, and then we hear the thunder, which is exactly where we find Norman in the original movie. It's a beautiful full circle moment, these two movies.
Well, Schyko 2 is a huge monument to the original.
And to your career, and we got to thank Richard Franklin, really, who...
Thank Richard Franklin for everything, for giving me the opportunity to write it and for making such a wonderful, brilliant sequel.
We really wish he was still here to appreciate this, but I'm sure he would smile knowing that.
Well, as
finally...
Richard says, as I'm seeing on screen right now, the producers wish to acknowledge their debt to Sir Alfred Hitchcock.
Yes.
And that's Richard.
And us in turn, let's to all the fans that grew up in this movie, we are in debt to Richard Franklin for doing the right thing when it came to bringing Norman back.
Yes.
I can't think of a better person to have done it.
Agree.
So,
Thank you,
Tom.
Norman. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for the commentary. We hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.
See you soon. Thank you, everybody.